He famously said that science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. And it's so funny because these days, so many people are on Twitter saying, believe in science or according to science. And you have to realize there's no such thing as science with a capital S. Science, the foundation of science is doubt. It is all about falsifiability. David Deutsch, who's kind of one of my current modern living physicist heroes, is a Popperian. Like he subscribes to Karl Popper's philosophy. And he basically says that if it's not falsifiable, it's not scientific. If you can't prove it false, if it's true up or down or left or right, it's not science. It doesn't require belief. You should be able to challenge it at all times. It should make risky predictions that are not obvious, and those predictions should then be tested. And you shouldn't be able to, after the fact, move the goalposts, or change how the predictions were set up. And so those are the hallmarks of good science: falsifiability, independent verifiability, and making risky and narrow predictions with details that are hard to vary both before and after the fact. And that's how you end up with good science and good explanations, not by people on Twitter voting. That's politics. So like everything has become politics now, science has become politics too. People have politicized it, and there's big science. But I think Feynman would be very unhappy with that. Although he was just a generally happy character and non-political and tended not to get involved in these things. But I think he would realize that that is not actually science, but it's masquerades as science. It's almost becoming social science. And going to Twitter, like Nassim Taleb is one of my favorite Twitter follows, even though he's a bit
cantankerous.
Yeah, he's cantankerous. Yeah, he annoys people for sure. But you want to hear the truth, you gotta be prepared to be hurt a little bit. But he had a great tweet recently that I retweeted, which I'm sure made a lot of people mad, where he said the opposite of education is not ignorance. The opposite of education is an education in social science. And I thought that was hilarious. But it hurts because there's some truth to it. If there was no truth to it, it wouldn't hurt at all. If I said Tim Ferriss is fat, that would just bounce right off of you. But if I said, Tim Ferriss and Naval are fake gurus, that might hit us, right? Because we kind of suspect at some deep level there's a part of that's true. So I think the same way, like with, social science does kind of lead you down the road to ignorance, because it's about social, and anything social is about groupthink and group behavior. And, individuals can search for truth, but groups search for consensus, because if a group doesn't have consensus, it can't get along. If it can't get along, it falls apart and there's conflict. And so the last place you're going to find truth is in large groups. And the moment you make science about large groups and about voting and about consensus, you're not really practicing science anymore.
Yeah, and the science with a capital S is dangerous. Also,
very dangerous. It's just propaganda. Yeah, it's propaganda. Yeah. Then it becomes like macroeconomics. Again, another Taleb line. He says it's easier to macro bullshit than it is to micro bullshit. And so big science is the equivalent of macroeconomics, whereas the equivalent of microeconomics is little science, which is, me in a lab or me with my computer and trying out various things. And so you can, just like with macroeconomics, you can pick and choose whatever data you want to prove whatever point you want. With big science, you can pick or choose whatever papers you want. So look at the fights right now on the internet about what COVID means. You can go down that hall of mirrors and find scientific, quote unquote, substantiation for many points of view, depending on which papers you choose to cherry pick. And so then we're reduced back to consensus. But again, science isn't done by consensus. It should be done by experimentation, verifiability, falsifiability, rigorous testing. And, in an ideal science world, you don't go and survey 10,000 scientists. You actually pick the one smartest scientist. But that's very hard to do. Now, no one can agree on who the smartest scientist is. So unfortunately, I think that the nature of what science is being corrupted. And that started the day we let the so-called social sciences masquerade as sciences. The day we said psychology is a science and politics can be a science and so on, and you can apply the scientific methods to those things, then I think that's the day we start to corrupt science, or at least the word science. So real science, these days is relegated to a very small corner, physics, maybe like molecular biology and chemistry, mathematics, theory of computation, but it's a fairly limited set.
Yeah, very quantitatively literate friend of mine said at one point, most of the disciplines that have science at the end of them are not actually science.
Although
right. There are some exceptions, right? So
computer science,
neuroscience,
yeah.
if it's hard neuroscience, would be an exception. But very often, if there's science appended to it, it is not, in fact, something that is falsifiable according to someone like Karl Popper, right? It cannot be proven or disproven using experiment, at least not
That's
in
right.
a definitive way.
If there isn't some experiment that could theoretically disprove it, then it's not science. Yeah, it's like Honest Abe's law firm, right? If he needs to put honest in the title, then you have to wonder. So the same way, if they put science in the word, other than, as you said, computer science and neuroscience, you sort of have to wonder.